Hi everyone, and thanks so much for joining me on another episode of Code with Lilly Code. So I've got a really exciting episode for you today. What I've done is wiped my entire computer. I've done a factory reset in order to show you how you need to set up your computer from scratch if you want to start coding. I remember when I first started, this was really difficult to get my head around and start coding. There's a lot of little things you need to get done and get in. So therefore, I'd like to step you through the motions and show you exactly how you can get your computer ready to start coding and committing code to Git. Just so I could show you from the very beginning how I set up my development environment, set up Git so I can commit to Git and GitHub and keep track of my code and save my code. So this is a really useful skill to learn and something you're going to have to use in a professional setting. So it's a great skill to just get down and have a little look at how it all works. So that's what we're going to be doing today, and thank you so much for joining me. Let's get started. So step one is going to be to download a code editor. A code editor allows you to view, edit, test your code, debug your code. It's basically just a notepad for code. So there's many different extensions and plugins you can add that allow you to make your code formatted, make it look nice. That's all formatting is. And to do different things with it. So you might have different extensions. We can go through all that and I'll show you how a code editor works and how to install and set one up. There are many different options for a code editor. Some popular ones are Brackets, which is free, WebStorm, which you do have to pay an annual fee for, and Visual Studio Code, which is a really popular one, and it's the one I'm going to show you how to set up today because it's my favourite code editor. I use it all the time and it has a lot of extensions and plugins that make it really useful, and it's a very widely used piece of software as well. So you shouldn't have any problems getting to grips with it, and also then you'll possibly use this in other roles in other places if you get a job in coding, which I'm sure you're here for that eventually, or maybe it's just a hobby. You know, it's very useful. So we'll start by setting up Visual Studio Code. So I'm just going to come to my browser and download Visual Studio Code. So if you just type in Visual Studio Code download into your web browser, you'll get an option to go to Visual Studio Code, and you just click on the link and download it as you would any normal piece of software. I'm on a Windows machine, so I'm going to download it for Windows. So once that's downloaded, you can just click on the link and go through the steps as you normally would. So I'll accept the license agreement. You can have a read of that if you want. It's all the usual jargon. And then click next. You select where you want to download it to. I'm happy with the designated folder, so I'll just click next. Visual Studio Code is fine for my folder name. So I'll just click through these. I don't need to create a desktop icon, but I will allow Add Open with Code to Actions in File Explorer. So this means when you're in your File Explorer and you might have your project, you can left click and just open it with code. So they're very handy to have the Open with Code. And that's all that I'm going to need for now, and I'll just click Install. Just let that install and I'll come back to you once it's finished. So then we can launch Visual Studio Code just to see what it looks like and get a feel for it. So I'll click Finish and leave Launch Visual Studio Code selected. So this is what Visual Studio Code looks like. It's just a code editor, and until we actually go through and start to add other software that allows us to write different projects, this won't really be too much use for the moment. So we'll just leave that there. So the second thing we're going to need if we want to do, say, an Angular project with JavaScript, HTML and CSS, is you need to install Node and NPM. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Come back to your browser and just type in Node install in your browser. Then we can go to download Node. Just click on the first link, which is the Node link, in order to come to the Node website where we can download Node. I'm on a Windows machine, so I'm going to download the Windows version. So once we're on this page, we can see it has an option for a 32-bit installer or a 64-bit installer. I'm on a Windows machine. There's also options for Mac or Linux. You can download the source code for Linux, or the Mac OS installer is also here. I'm going to check whether I have a 32-bit or a 64-bit system, just to show you how you would do that yourself. And then we can download the correct version. So if you come down to the Start button and you go to Settings, this will open up your settings for you. From here you go to System, and in System you go to About. From here we can see that I have a 64-bit operating system. So therefore I'm going to download the 64-bit version of the Node installer. So I'll just click 64-bit. Save this to wherever it wants to save. It's saving in my documents here. I'll actually just save this in my downloads instead. Once Node is downloaded, we can run and install it. I'll come up here to my settings in my browser. I happen to be using Brave, but this could be Chrome, Firefox, IE. Generally they're all set up very similar. So you can just go to your downloads folder. And from there you'll see your Node setup. So show it in folder, and then you can just double click it to run. So now this is going to take me through the installation wizard, just as we did with Visual Studio Code, and we'll step through and get Node installed on our machines. So I'll just accept the license terms. This is fine. The program files Node.js, that's fine folder. And then also if we would need anything else, we can decide here. So this is all okay for me. I'm going to just click Next. And then I don't need Chocolatey, so I won't install Chocolatey. I'll just click Next. Chocolatey is just a package manager installation tool, and I don't need it right now, so I'll leave that. And then just click Install. So that didn't take too long at all. Now we can see we have the window that says Finish, so we can just click Finish, and this installation is now complete. So that's great. Now we have Node and our code editor set up. Let's try and start a project and see how that goes. I'm going to go to the Angular official documents so we can try and follow along and fill any gaps as we go. So if we just come back to our browser and type in Angular, it'll just bring up Angular, and we can go to the Angular website. And from there we can go to Get Started and follow through the steps in order to set up an Angular project and open it in our code editor, Visual Studio Code. From there we can download some extensions that I find very helpful and that are very commonly used in the coding industry, and see how a project works. So let's get on with that. We'll just go here to Get Started and click Get Started on the angular.io website. From here we have a Get Started box which tells you how to set up your local development. So we'll go here and make sure we have everything covered for our Angular setup. Setting up the local environment and workspace. If we just scroll down a little bit after the prerequisites, JavaScript, HTML and CSS, which I would greatly recommend Free Code Camp in order to learn these basics. And then this is really when you want to step into using your code editor and start doing projects. So once you've got the basics down with HTML, CSS and JavaScript, which you can learn for free on Free Code Camp, because it's free, then you can start doing larger projects and perhaps using frameworks. So Angular is a JavaScript framework, which just means it packages things up and make it easy for you to create a fully functional single page JavaScript website. And that's what we're going to be doing today, is setting up one of these. So here we can see npm package manager. The Angular CLI and Angular applications depends on npm packages. So as you create your website using the Angular framework, you'll find that there's different packages and installs that you might want to add to adapt and expand on your current project. There's simple things that you can use, like say a package to allow you to draw graphs in your project, a package to allow you to better handle date and time entries in your project. There's so many different packages that you can add that will really assist you to do certain things. So when you get there, you can figure it out and have a look, and it's really helpful to use this Angular package manager. So in order to have this, we should have this covered with our Node install, but we'll just check by following through the list and seeing what it says the requirements are. So you need to have your npm package manager, which is installed with Node.js by default. To check that you have the npm client install, run npm v in a terminal window. So in order to get to your terminal, all you have to do is go to your Windows bar and type in terminal. And this will open up your command prompt that comes with Windows. I'm going to pin this, it's already pinned. In here I can write in npm and v to get the version, and it will tell me whether or not I already have npm installed, which I do. Here we can see I have version 6.14.14, and that came with that node install, so you don't need to worry about this, just so you know how to access your terminal and have a little look at that. So it can be useful to have a go and make sure you do have it installed, but you should do from your node install. So from there, as you scroll down, you'll see install the Angular CLI. So we'll do this now. You use the Angular CLI to create projects and perform a variety of ongoing development tasks such as testing, bundling and deployment. So all this means is testing your code, bundling it together in a good package before you deploy it, and deployment is just putting it live on the website, deploying it to a server so you can access that website then. So we'll globally install the Angular CLI in order to be able to use it across all of our Angular projects. So if we scroll down here on the Angular website, you'll see you have install the Angular CLI. So this is the next step in order to get an Angular project off the ground. So we'll just click copy and go to our terminal, paste in this command and hit enter. It's as simple as that. And that will install the Angular CLI for us globally so we can use it across all of our Angular projects. I'll come back to you when this is fully installed. So the next thing I want to do is create a folder on my computer, and I'll do this through the terminal to show you how to do this, and that's where we'll create our Angular project. So what I'll do is, with the use of the terminal, I'm going to create a new folder in order to store all of my code projects. And this is a good process to use because you know where everything is stored and you can keep it all together neat and tidy. So in order to see what folder I'm currently in from the terminal, I can type dir. And this will just tell me what folders I can move into. So from here, I want to move into the documents folder. And in order to do this, you type cd and then start typing documents. And in order to auto-complete the rest, you can hit tab. Say if there was two different folders with the first name doc, it might not tab into it. So just keep typing and then hit tab. And once it's an original file, one with a singular name that's not used somewhere else, it will complete the rest of the name for you. Then you can hit enter in order to move into this folder. Now I'm in my documents folder. You can see here in the terminal, I'm in the C drive, users, Lilly code, that's just the name of my computer, and now I'm inside the documents folder. So from here, I'm going to create a new folder to store all of my Angular projects. To do this, you type mkdir, which stands for make directory, and then I'm going to call my folder sites, as this is what I usually call my websites folder. From here we can cd into sites, which means move into that folder, and just hit enter again. So now I'm inside the folder I've just created, and if I come here to my Finder and go to my documents, you can see it's created this folder for me here. So that's worked. We have our folder created through the use of the terminal. So I'll just X out of my Finder window. So you can see here, as we scroll down on the Angular install directions, the next step to create a new Angular project, and this will actually be your Angular project that we can then look at in our code editor, which is Visual Studio Code, and start playing around with it, start messing around with it. From here you could follow an Angular tutorial and start learning an Angular project. So we've really made some progress today. So the next step is to create a workspace and an initial application. So again, we'll just copy this code from the folder where we want our new project to be created. So we'll paste this into the sites folder and hit enter, and this will create our new Angular project. So when you type this in, it will ask you, do you want to include routing? This just allows you to more easily route around your application. These files will be included for you. So I'll say yes. I'm going to do my project with CSS, cascading styling sheets. So I'll select CSS for this project. You also have the options of SCSS, SAS and LESS. CSS, I would say, is the most commonly used, and it's the one you will have learned in Free Code Camp if that's how you got up to scratch with your programming. So let's select CSS. And now it's creating my very first Angular application for me. Just this will take a moment to run, so I'll come back to you when it's finished. So now that's it, our first Angular application has been successfully installed. So let's open it with Visual Studio Code, our code editor, and see how it all works. One way to do this is to open your File Explorer and find that file. Because we selected the option to allow us to open our Visual Studio Code projects from the Windows Explorer, we can now do that easily. It's the same with Mac. So you should be able to open your project straight from your Windows Explorer. So let's do that. We'll open up our Windows Explorer and we're going to go to the folder where we saved our first Angular project, which is Sites in Documents. And we can see My App. So if we right click on this, we can see Open with Code as an option. So let's select Open with Code. And I'm just going to say yes, I trust the authors of all the files in the parent folder Sites, as I created this folder. So I do trust it. So I'll click yes. And now we can see our first Angular application. The way an Angular project is set up is you have your source file, which contains all of the different files that you need in order to use your Angular application. In the app folder then, you'll see the general layout of your Angular project. I'll just make this full screen. And in order to see this running, we can open up the terminal. There's an integrated terminal, which is the same as this command prompt. But we can open an integrated terminal in Visual Studio Code, which is very handy. So we'll go to Terminal and New Terminal. And this will open up the integrated terminal. From here, because we opened our folder that we wanted to be in, our My App, which was the name of the application we created when we ran this command, ng-new, and My App is the name of the new Angular project we wanted to set up. So now we're inside the My App folder. When we open the terminal, it will open it in this folder for us. So if you're not already in this folder, you'll need to be in your project folder, and then you can run your Angular application. So in order to do this, we just type in ng-serve and hit enter. So it seems once I hit ng-serve on my computer, I got an error. So let's figure this out together. This is what a programmer's life is all about. Googling errors and finding solutions. So let's do it together. It says it cannot be loaded because running scripts is disabled on my system. So let's see how we can enable these. So we'll copy this and find out how we can enable the scripts in order to allow us to run our Angular application. So I'll copy this error, go to my browser and just search this error and it will give us a solution, I'm sure. So Stack Overflow is a great resource for web developers and new developers, professional developers, where there's a list of different questions that programmers face and solutions. So you can go here to see what other people have done in order to solve this problem. Stack Overflow will become your best friend as a web developer. So here's a possible solution. It could be because the current user has an undefined execution policy. So in order to fix this, we just need to set it to unrestricted. When it's listed like this, it's not immediately obvious, but what we're supposed to do with this is run this in our terminal. So I'll just copy this command, go back to my terminal, paste it, and run it. So that doesn't work. So what I'll do is cd back to my root, which I don't think will make a difference, but we'll still cd back. So if we do cd .. // it brings us back a folder. So now I'm just in my root Lilly code user folder and I still can't run that command. So let's try another solution. PowerShell. So it does say we need to run this in PowerShell and in administrative mode. So let's try that. We'll go to search, type in power, and here we can see Windows PowerShell. If we right click, we can run this as an administrator. And just click yes. And this just allows you to change settings and stuff from the PowerShell, which is like the terminal. So again, I'll just copy and paste this command and paste it into PowerShell and see if that works for us, which it looks like it's going to. Okay, great. The execution policy helps you to protect you from scripts that you do not trust. So this is okay. We know that we trust npm. We know we trust ng-serve when we're running it. So it's just being slightly careful, but we don't need it to be. We know what we're doing here. So we'll just say yes to all by typing in a capital A and hitting enter. Now let's see if we can run our project now. So we'll go back to Visual Studio Code. and we'll try and run that again and see what happens. So in order to get back the last command, you just hit up, the up arrow on your keyboard, and it'll bring up the last ran command. So I hit up, ngserve popped up the last command, and then I just hit enter. So it looks like this is working now. We just had to change our execution scripts from a brand new laptop setup. So now you know how to do that. You go into your PowerShell, run it as an administrator, and run that command that I put in, that I found from Stack Overflow. I'll include all these links and the commands in the description box below to make this setup easier for you. So there we go. Our application has successfully loaded, and we can see now we have it running. Our Angular Live development server is listening on port 4200, and to open it we just need to click this link. So if you hover over it, it gives you instructions there. You just press ctrl and follow the link, and it's opened it for us in our Brave browser. So here is our new Angular application, which is brilliant. We now have a running Angular application. We can edit this, do different things, and mess around and make a website or whatever you'd like to make. So I'll just give you a quick rundown of how all this ties together. So if I move this over here and have our code editor here, we can see our folder structure over here. So the app component is the first file that bootstraps up when you run your Angular project. So from here we can see we have some embedded styles, which that's all fine. And then if we scroll down, we should see this content. So we have our welcome. This is up in the nav bar. So we have our div containing our toolbar and our banner, which is this top section. By using this arrow, you can collapse and expand your code. So this whole amount from this div to this div is our header toolbar. We have our toolbar class here. That's what's contained within this top section. So we can see we have our image, the Angular logo. Then we have a span with a welcome. So that's this welcome. And then we have our different buttons. Our first link is a link to Angular on Twitter. And our second link is a link to Angular on YouTube, which is what we can see here. So if we comment this out by highlighting it, and then you just click ctrl and / in order to comment out code. So we'll comment that out and click save. And you should see the top banner disappear. So there we go. Our top banner has disappeared, and you can see how that integrates then. So this will be a great place to start an Angular project online. You have all your development environment set up, and now you can go ahead and create an Angular project. So in order to just round this off, I'm going to set up Git and GitHub, which is where you can save your code and version control your code. So you can save your code at different snapshots, and if something goes wrong, you can roll back to a previous snapshot. So you can effectively save and download your code. If you're at a new computer somewhere else and you've done this setup that we've just spoke about, so you have your code editor, you can go to GitHub, select a URL and bring that whole project down to a new computer very easily. So you don't need to save your code on a USB stick and bring it around, which is what I did in the beginning because I didn't realize that Git was something that was there for people to save their code on. Everything is learning. So hopefully you've learned something today. So what we're going to do is go to Git and just save our code. So I'll show you how to do that now. So we'll just go back to our browser. I'll open a new tab and I'm going to type in GitHub. From here, Google just opens up. The first link is GitHub, and if we click on this, we can set up a new GitHub account. So I'll click the sign up button on GitHub, and I'm going to create a new GitHub account. So I'll just enter my email address, which is lily_code@outlook.com, and click continue. From there, I can create a password and click continue again. And now I'll just enter a username, lilycode1, and hit continue. Do I want to receive product updates announcements via email? No, I always say no to these. And then we just need to solve a puzzle to prove we're a human, which isn't great because these CAPTCHAs are not the best for people with accessibility issues, so they really shouldn't be used. But here's the spiral galaxy, and now we can create our account. So they've just sent a code to my Outlook, so I'm going to go and get that code and type it in. So to do this, you just open up my email and retrieve this code, type it into the box, and we should be all set up. So I have my code. I'm just going to paste it in over here. And there we go, we're in. Wow, GitHub has some great new visuals. I love that. So great, we've got our GitHub account set up, and now we can create our first GitHub repository in order to save this new Angular application that we've started. And this is how you would generally commit and save your code in any organization. So it's a great skill to know how to use and commit code to GitHub. So in order to create our first repository, which is just a folder on GitHub where you'll store your code, we just come over here to the Create Repository button. So let's click that and follow through. The owner is Lilly Code, that's fine. And I'm going to call the repository Angular My App, as My App was the name we gave our project. So that's perfect. You can give a description if you like. So I might say my first Angular application. You can add a README if you want, which is just, a README is just a file in order to explain how to run your code or specific information about this project. So you can add one in or you don't have to, it's completely up to yourself. But as you get a bit more versed with GitHub, this is a great file in order to see what's inside a project, how you can run a project. If you're looking at someone else's code, you can even go onto GitHub and look at other people's projects and start with them and pull them down onto your computer or check how they've done something. So it's a really great resource. So I'm going to create the repository now by just clicking Create Repository. So there we go. So before we can go ahead and use Git, we have to install Git. So we'll do that first on our computer. So if I just go to a new tab in my browser, I can install Git. Once I Google this, the first link is how to install Git. So we'll click on this, installing Git. I'll make this large again. So from the page here, you can see there are several options: installing on Linux, installing on Mac, and installing on Windows. So what I'll do, I'll follow the first option and download Git. I'll just save this to my downloads folder, run it, and then we'll have Git installed. The same as all of the other installs, you just download it from the web, click through, and you should be flying. Next, this folder is fine for me. Next, all of this is okay. So yes, I do want Git Bash. I don't need an icon on the desktop. I just am going to stick to all the settings that come out of the box. I'll keep the name as Git because that makes sense. And then we have a drop down. Any of these options is fine, but there is an option to use Visual Studio Code as Git's default editor. So I'm going to select this, seeing as we've installed Visual Studio Code and we're using it. But any of these options will be fine. You're going to have Git on your computer and you can use Git, so I wouldn't worry about it. And click Next. That's fine. Git can decide what it wants to do. Yes, I would like to use Git from the command line and also from third-party software, so I'll click Next. Using the OpenSSL library is fine for me. I'm just going to click through these because I don't tend to give these too much thought. Everything that generally comes out of the box is fine. And then we'll install. So this will just take a few moments and I'll come back to you when it's done. So perfect, now we have Git installed and we can just click Finish. From here now, we should be able to commit and push our code using Visual Studio to save our code on GitHub. We'll go back to Visual Studio Code and we'll run these commands again. So as I was telling you before, if you just hit up, it'll get up the last command. So it's git init, which is to initialize a new repository. That's still not working, but what could be the problem is I didn't restart my terminal. So I'll just restart my terminal and try again before I start debugging anything else. So let's reopen our terminal, new terminal, and try git init again. So it's still not working, so I'm going to copy this command and see what the problem could be on my browser again. And as you'll probably face the same errors, I don't see the point in editing this out because you're going to need to go through the same things. So I've just searched for this issue in my browser and we can see the first link is a Stack Overflow, which again is a very trusted source. So let's see what they have to say on Stack Overflow about this. So yes, this is the same error we're getting and he's asked, how do I fix this? So let's see what the solutions are. Have you correctly set your path to point at your Git installation? No, we didn't do that, so let's figure that out. Modifying the path. In the Start menu, search for your environment variable. So here we go, edit the system environment variables. Click on the environment variables button at the bottom. Double click the path entry under system variables. And from here we can add in these two paths to the end of the list. So let's do that. So again, I'll just split screen because it makes everything so much easier. And from here we can add a new one. So we'll click new and I'm just going to copy this path and click new and paste that in there. And also this second one to the end of the list. So we'll just copy, hit new, paste it in and click OK. Let's click OK again. And there we go, that's set up. Just to be safe, I'm going to close and open my Visual Studio Code because this can also be a problem. Maybe it's just cached in Visual Studio Code. So let's close down the whole application and reopen it and try again. So we go back to our folder, we right click and go down to Open with Code. This will open up our folder in Visual Studio Code. Then if we open our terminal again, which it's already opened here, so and within the right folder because that's the folder we opened, I'll just do git init again and see how that goes. There we go, it worked. So it was just because Visual Studio Code hadn't quite updated that setting yet. So now we have our empty Git repository initialized, which is fabulous. We have it done. So in order to add code, to stage it for committing, you need to add it for staging. So I'll just do git add, and dot means everything. So I'll git add everything. So here you can see you can do a git add just a readme, but because we have all these other files, it's not an empty repository that we're initializing. I've just added everything with git add dot, which is git add everything. So we'll do that. And then we can do our first commit. So let's copy something similar to this, just a slight deviation so you can see an alternative way of doing it. So git commit, and then it's a -m, so this is your message, and I'm just going to use single quotes and have a slightly different message. So this is my first Angular project. And this is the first commit message that I'm going to use. So then we can just hit enter. You just close it with your single quotes or double quotes if you use double, and hit enter. So we've come across another error. First of all, we need to configure our username and our email with git config. So let's do that now. So we just copy these commands and run them. So we do git config global user.email, and my email is lillycode@ and hit enter. So there we go, that should be set now. And now we'll do our username as well. So git config global and user.name, I think, yeah, and it's going to be lillycode. There we go, so they're set now. So now let's try and do that commit again and see how that works for us. So if we just press up, up, up through the commands to get back the git commit command and hit enter, there we go, we have committed our code. So that's brilliant, which is what we have here. We have a brand new repository, so we need to run these commands. Whereas if this was a project you already had set up and you just wanted to add new changes, which I'll do that now, I'll step you through that. You just add, commit and push. But because this is our first project, we need to run these other commands. So we do git branch -m. So this is just telling us that we want to create a git branch and it's called main. So there we go. And then we'll also run this other command, git remote add origin. So this is the origin of our Git repository, and it's at github.com Lilly code Angular my app, which was the name of the repository we created. So I'll copy this, paste it into my terminal and hit enter. There we go. Now we can push up to GitHub in order to save this code, and this will save our code. We don't need to worry about our code, and we can roll back if we have any issues. So it's really helpful. So let's copy and run the push command and hit enter. Okay, so I need to sign in with my browser. Okay, so let's authorize Git credential manager. Now there we go. So now we have pushed our code. If we come back to Git, and let's make this large just so we can properly see it, and click on Angular my app. Here we can see my commit. This is my first Angular project and all of our folders here. So as I was showing you in Visual Studio Code, we have the source folder with the app folder. And then in here we have our app component HTML file, which contains that first page where the main application is booted up from. So if we go in here and have a look, we should see our style as we had, and the navigation should be commented out as we did. So let's have a look, which it is. There we go. Our toolbar has been commented out. So let's just make a change by uncommenting this, commit the code and push it. And then there you have your Angular project set up. You've got Git set up, your code editor set up, Visual Studio Code, and you can create changes in your project, add different bits, add sections, mess around and commit it. And if anything goes wrong, you can roll back. So we've really set up everything here now today in order to get you off the ground if you're a new programmer. So we'll go back to Visual Studio Code, and from here I'm going to uncomment this section of code. So this will count as a change. So I'll uncomment this by highlighting it, clicking CTRL and the / button, which will uncomment this. And then if we hit save, that's saved. And now we can see in here, this tells us our source control, the different changes we have. So this is a different way you can commit and push code to Git. So I'll show you this second way as well. So if we go in here, this is how you can do your Git add. So this is Git add for just this specific folder. If we changed for just this specific file, if we changed a different file, say for example CSS, and if this was a class called color and we had background color red, a second file is now edited. So if I save that, we have two changes now in our source control. Now I don't have any CSS class called color in my Angular HTML file, so this shouldn't make any changes. It was just to show you how to change a second file, but these classes are what that .color corresponds to. So there isn't a .color in here, so we can just go ahead. It's just to show you a second change. So if we wanted to add both of these files, we can use this plus icon, and this will stage our changes for commit. So now they're staged for commit. And then we can type in our second message here. So second commit, uncommenting header, which just make it a little bit descriptive, give a bit of an idea, and you can hit enter or click this tick. And now we have added and committed our code. So if we come back down to our terminal and type in git and push, this time this is all you need to do to push up your code because you've configured everything, and hit enter. We should have a second commit message in GitHub. So let's go back to GitHub and check that out. So if we go back to our main project, Angular my app, we can see our second commit there. So there you go. We've got our first and second commit. So we've got two commits. This is my first Angular project and second commit uncommenting header. I'll show you one last way to commit your code and then I'll wrap up this video. So if we go back to Visual Studio Code and say if I wanted to add perhaps a title, so I'll just go up to the top where our code starts after our style tag, because that's just the styles for this page. Let's add a H2 tag, which is just a smaller header than H1, so it's a level 2 header. This is my first app. And save that. And there you have it. It's successfully compiled. So if we click on localhost 4200 with CTRL and just clicking this link, it'll open our Angular application in our browser. So now we can see the changes we've made in our project, and I'll show you how to add and commit this code to your GitHub repository using just the terminal this time. So here we'll do git add a, just to add everything, which is the one file that we've changed. So as we can see in app component, you can look at your changes. Here we have our 2-line changes within this app component HTML file. So that's staged now for commit. So then if we come back down to the terminal, we can say git commit with a -m to give our message, and then within single quotes say my third commit, adding a h2 tag. Let's close off our sentence with another single quote and hit enter. So now we can see we have 3 insertions, 1 file is changed, and if we do git push and go back to git, we can see that this change has been logged in GitHub in our repository. So let's go back to Git in our browser and take a look at this. If I go back to Angular My App and then click on the commits, we can see there's 3 commits. So there you have it. You've successfully set up your code editor. You've successfully set up an Angular project, and you've successfully committed it to GitHub. So thanks so much for joining me. I really hope this was helpful. This took me a long time to figure out when I first started, so I really hope it saved you some time. And if you did like this content, please do like and subscribe. And I wish you all an absolutely fabulous day. And thanks so much for joining me on another episode of Code with Lilly Code. Have a lovely day, everybody.